What's the ultimate objective with Supernova?
Well, we would like to become a bit like the Tomorrowland of tech. That's the ambition. If things then don't go as promised, which is always the case, then I'm not too hustled about it because I'm used to that. The future is never the same like the history, but you can see and you can recognize patterns in certain things that can allow you and help you to assess how the world is moving and what the world is going to.
You've passed on a deal and later regretted it.
Yes. And so what we try to do is basically provide answers to these questions and tell entrepreneurs, listen.
So in this episode, I'm talking with Jürgen Ingels. And most people really know him as an investor. But honestly, that's only half the story. Jürgen is really a builder at heart. He built and exited companies that just kept going. He went on to build one of the biggest tech events in Europe, Supernova, and this year he's launching the first edition of Cybernova. And why? Because he genuinely loves helping founders to build better companies and also faster. And before we start talking, here is already one key thing you should know. Most founders think that they decide investing in you just based on your spreadsheets, your business plan. But they don't. Because experienced investors like Jürgen, they really rewrite your plan with all the experience they have over the last decades. They add time on your plan, they add more costs. And then they will still ask themselves, yeah, but is this really that will work? And that's just one. So in this episode, we have 15 that you will find that you can apply in how you build, how you pitch, and how you scale your organization. So from how investors really think to why the lack of focus kills more startup skill than the funding itself. So grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's get into it. So we're going to start immediately with the most important question, the most burning question right now is, you have managed to invite Barack Obama, Oprah Winfrey, and you recently announced also Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, how do you even start inviting them? Because it's, I guess, not a walk in the park.
Yeah, but we always start from a kind of team, and so a team for Supernova, and the team this year was Reinvent Yourself. So that's the team for this year's edition. Reinvent yourself because, with everything that's happening in the world geographically, but also the technological evolutions, I mean, people have to really adapt, reinvent themselves, but also not only people, but also companies and even states have to reinvent themselves. And we thought, okay, we always think about in the team who could be like a great guy to come and talk about that. And for us, for me also, Arnold Schwarzenegger is like, he's the ultimate, he's the ultimate guy if you think about reinventing yourself, because in his life he started as in gym and he became Mr. Universe, blah blah blah, all of that stuff, and then he reached everything, and then he said, well, now I'm done, I want to become an actor. But he didn't even speak decent English and he didn't have any acting skills, but still he pushed through and he went to Hollywood, and then obviously he's the guy with the biggest box office ever. And so he realized with his movies, and then he again won everything that's to win. And then he said, well, now I'm on the top. And then he started and saying, well, I will become like governor of California. And everybody said to him, that's going to take you 10 years. And he did it in a few years. So the guy is, from that perspective, he's impressive for me, because it's somebody who goes to the top and then says, I've done everything that I could in this sector and I'm going to do something else. So it's almost parallel working. It's different things doing different things. And I'm a bit like that as well, in the sense that I work in one sector, I go to the other. I also like that. So that's why what's one of the reasons. And then to answer the question, how do we do that? A lot of people think it's easy. You just pull up a lot of money and then they come. It doesn't work at all like that. It has nothing to do actually with money. It's much more about network. So I use a lot of people that I know who have contacts in the States with people, and so on and so forth. And then ultimately we get to him and then we try to attack him on different fronts on the same day with different people. And so that's the way we try to do it. doesn't always work. It's difficult. I can tell you, it's really difficult. It takes a lot of time to get there. And then we try to convince the people to say, hey, you should come over because that's the philosophy about Supernova. We want to inspire people. We want to inspire young people. We want to show entrepreneurship and so on. And that's, well, so far we've always been able to manage it. I have to admit it's difficult. It's not easy. But I'm also very happy because I think if you look into the line of Obama and then Oprah and now Arnold, I think he fits the line. I think it's fine. So that's a bit how we did it.
Now, if we go back to the first steps into your entrepreneurship, you built Clear to Pay a few years ago into, let's say, plus 1,000 people, multiple countries, sold it eventually. That's already a big journey. Then the path into investments. So I think people could describe you probably as an entrepreneur at heart, and not a pure investor, of course. So how do these early years as an entrepreneur help you today in investing in the newer startups, scale-ups here in Belgium and abroad?
Yeah. Well, first of all, maybe I set up the fund because when I sold my company, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, you were lucky," and I thought, well, is this luck? Because I was working like a lot, and I thought, can you do this again? And rather to do it again as an entrepreneur, I thought if you do it through a fund, then I can do it similar things at the same time at different companies. And so now 10 years fast forward, we've done the same thing that I've done with Peer to Pay with my company, but with like at least 10 Flemish companies, building them out into like 200, 300 million valuation companies. And that I think is, for me, gives a lot of satisfaction. Now, have I learned anything as an investor towards being an entrepreneur? I think having been an entrepreneur helps me definitely to become or to look at things differently. I look at it much more from an entrepreneurial angle if I see a file, to the extent that I've realized in all of the stuff that I've done entrepreneurial and the companies I've been involved, it always takes longer than you think. Always. So you think it's going to be ready in the second quarter of, I don't know, next year's fourth quarter. It's always like 6 to 9 months, 2 to 3 quarters later. And you need more money, roughly between 25 to 40%. And so that's something I've learned. I know that. And I'm at ease because I know if an entrepreneur makes his plan, I'm also going to think in my head, okay, it's going to take two quarters longer for the first customers to come in. It's going to need more money. And so liquidity, cash flow, technical, he's going to need more money, blah, blah, blah. So I take that into account. And so if things then don't go as promised, which is always the case, then I'm not too hustled about it because I'm used to that. And I think somebody who hasn't lived through being an entrepreneur and having lived through that scene is probably going to panic a bit more, or is going to be putting a lot more pressure on the entrepreneur to still get stuff done because the numbers are the numbers. And then that's when you make mistakes, in my opinion. So being patient and knowing that Rome isn't built in like one day, that I think is something I've learned from being an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. And of course, your role as an investor, but ex-entrepreneur, but I think you're still also, in a way, still entrepreneur in the companies you invest. How does this influence those companies in how they operate? Of course, your company, SmartFin, they will take a stake and also a seat on the board, but eventually, how do you steer those companies?
Yeah.
And what is your main role as an investor?
Yeah. I see our role more, and my role as well, more as a kind of coach, mentor. So I'm never going to try to replace the entrepreneur. It's their company. They should run it. So that's one important thing. But on the other hand, we do coach and we do mentor. What I've seen in both startups and scale-ups is that roughly people have like 100 questions. And 100 questions, I have to set up sales commission plan. How do I do that? I need to set up an ERP system. How do I do that? And so on and so forth. And trying to resolve some of these 100 questions takes a lot of time of entrepreneurs who have not done it before, on one hand. And so what we try to do is basically provide answers to these questions and tell entrepreneurs, listen, we have an answer to these questions. We're not saying that we know everything, but we have done this like 7, 8, 9 times already. So we know what systems work, what doesn't work, what you should do and how you should do it. And we try to help the companies to say, rather than you trying to figure it out, focus on your business, focus on what you're good at, try to sell your products, try to improve your products, and we will help you to set up all the nitty gritty things on the side that you don't really like, an HR system, or a sales commission plan, or transfer pricing model, or whatever, you name it. And that's I think how we try to add value, helping really um, to entrepreneurs focusing on what really matters for them, and that typically is product and also sales.
And is that not also the ecosystem, the smartphone ecosystem over the last, let's say, decade, I think, where you have invested in, that also the ecosystem plays a kind of crucial role in sharing knowledge
Yeah, for sure,
between
for sure.
CEOs and all those companies with,
And not
let's say,
just not just our ecosystem. I mean, if you look at, that's one of the reasons why we actually started Supernova, uh, to inspire people, yes, and to have a drink at the bar, yes. But the main part of Supernova is twofold. One, we attract around 300 VCs from all over the world to come and listen to entrepreneurs. So that's one angle.
Mhm.
Most of these VCs have never been to Belgium or look at Belgium as a flyover zone. So they go to London, to Paris. Now they come. That's one. And the second is more a kind of learning. You sit there, you walk around, you meet other entrepreneurs, you can talk with them. Hey, you have a bigger company. How did you do this? How did you manage this? Learning from each other, and also building your network. Because as with Supernova, what we've done with Obama and Oprah and so on, it's the network that helps you to achieve things. It's obviously you have to have a product and you have to have passion, all of that stuff. Yes, but if you have a very good network, it helps you to actually establish and get things done.
Mhm. And by the way, what's the ultimate objective with Supernova? Because at the end, this is the third edition, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, where do you see Supernova going in 5 years?
Yeah, I think, well, we would like to become a bit like the Tomorrowland of tech. That's the ambition. I'm not saying that's going to work. This year, actually, we're working for the first time together with people around Tomorrowland. So that's the first small step, working together. And I think also brands should enforce each other. But the ultimate goal is that we could like become not necessarily a big, like we don't want to have like 100,000 people, but maybe 10 to 20,000 people, and really bring a lot of added value to the investors, but also to entrepreneurs. That's the ultimate goal. And so for us, it's not about, we have 20, 30, 40,000 people. It's much more, we helped 10 entrepreneurs to get 1, 2, 3 million, 10 million, $50 million at Supernova. And if you look in the last editions, it's really helping. Well, of the things that we're going to track in the next editions is how much money is actually getting done, or how much deals are getting done at Supernova for funding. Because you read after Supernova sometimes in the Belgian newspaper, this company has raised 30 million, this company has raised 10 or 50. Not all of them, but a lot of them, actually the first contacts happened at Supernova. And I think that for me is the ultimate goal, that what we do is sensitive and has a lot of added value.
Okay, and it's of course a good network for your fund as well
Of course, of
to
course,
find the
of course.
the newest gold diamonds,
Yeah.
or at least maybe not the diamonds as sharp as they should be,
Yeah.
but at least to
But also
capture
for us,
them.
it helps us to get in touch with all these large funds. So we have, although we're a very small fund in Europe, we have a very good network with all these large funds. We know partner levels and so on. So if we have a company in our portfolio that says we need 100 million, we know how to get there, and we know the right partners for it.
Okay. And if when I, let's say, did my background check, because at the end you have done so much, I had to. I asked, let's say, a few of my friends to say, "Hey, what do you know of Jurgen? What's your take?" Also, the analysis of your portfolio. It's so diverse. You have Timefold, you have Ziver, you have Fimple, Crazy Games as well. So it's a very diverse type of sectors that you're investing in. Of course, you're not really specific investing in. You're more agnostic in more or less the best company that fits.
Mhm.
Um, but what's then the inner compass? Because the first time that we've met, I told you I wanted to speak with you about the gut feeling, uh, how to invest, when to invest, and how much data is involved. How do you do this with even in new sectors that you have maybe no experience in, or
Uh,
because it's very fascinating for me. It's sometimes already hard to understand one company or one sector. Let's stay aside sectors that you had not even thought about.
Yeah, there is some logic in the madness, and I'll try to explain what the logic in the madness is. What we've done with Clear to Pay, with my former company, we basically built back office systems in the payment industry, and so we were a kind of platform that dealt with a new system, how to actually get money from one point in the world to another point, and it was like a back office platform. And the nice thing about working for a bank is that it needs to be, and payments is that it needs to work, it needs to be 100% certain, and it needs to be very secure. And so those components is always something I've taken with me. And if you look into our portfolio, and you can look at not all of them, but a lot of our companies are actually, I would say, platform companies. Look at Deliveract, which is a platform for the hospitality sector, restaurants. Look at Silverfin, who was a platform for accountants. This if you look at them, there's always like kind of platform, and I like that because you have a choice in life. You can say I'm going to buy a car and then I'm going to drive my car on an autobahn, or you can actually say forget about cars, I'm going to build autobahn. I kind of like the autobahn because every time there's an autobahn, I can ask a car who runs on my autobahn to pay for it, on one hand. And secondly, I can build my own cars on my own autobahn. And so what we've tried to do, and if you look into our portfolio, not all of them again, but some of them, and most of them, I would say 60% of our portfolio is actually platform. It's always the same thing that we do, security in the cloud, blah, 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 but always in different sectors. It's in the restaurant sector, it's in the accounting sector, it's in the gaming sector, but it's always the same thing, if you will. And I think, yeah, it's the same stuff. And that I think is the logic in the madness. If you look at it outside, you say, well, what's this? It's in the gaming and in the accounting, and what's the, but it always is the same trick underlying it in a way. So
Okay. And of course, you mentioned already the Liver Act. I think it's one of the yeah, the biggest of coming unicorns. I don't know if they are already.
yes, I think a
Voila.
few years ago, two or
Well,
3 years ago already, 2 years ago. Yeah.
so and then you have also you've done an IPO. I think other things pending probably. Um, are those the moments that, let's say, shaped how you, let's say, invest today with all the knowledge you have, or do you always think clean sheets, also different times, and I focus from there? Because how
Yeah.
much does the past influence investments today?
Well, again, there's always a strategy. I mean, if I look at, we've been lucky investors in Silverfin, which we sold to Visma, and we've been still investors in Bright Analytics. Um, we have done Unified Post. If you look into those companies, after I sold my company, which was in payments in 2014, I thought, okay, the next wave is not going to be payments; it's going to be accounting software, automating accounting, reporting, all of that stuff. Uh, and then if you look at today, we've then decided we're going to invest in those areas. Nobody wanted to invest in those areas because they were old fashioned, nothing changed in there, blah, blah, blah. And if you look 10 years further, if you now look at Visma, who basically bought everything that's to buy in that space, we've built like three big companies in that space, three European players. And we started from Zippo, more or less. We're small companies with 5 people, 3 people, and so I think a vision on where the world is going is also important, and that's why I I I really fond of history, because I think if you understand history, it the future is never the same like the history, but you can see and you can recognize patterns in certain things that can allow you and help you to assess how the world is moving and what the world is going to, and that is, I think, is something that I'm occupied myself a lot with, and I read a lot about it because it fascinates me to understand. So, from a sociological, psychological, philosophical perspective, might you think it's strange because you're a technology investor, but I think understanding how that works and also how the interaction in people and teams work is very important. And for me, again, the team, everybody says that people are important, but for me, the interaction in the team, and I would even say the most of the successful entrepreneurs that I know have two things in common. They all are passionate, but they all had some kind of thing that happened in their life which frustrated them. And it could be different things. It could be they wanted to become, they wanted to do university, but the parents didn't have money, and so they never got a university degree, and they had to do something lower than that, and it frustrates them the whole life. Or their father was a drunk guy who came to home and made life miserable, and they saw that when they were young, and they don't want that. And so it's really, really interesting. There's always some kind of frustration that fires up inside the body of that founder, and that makes it kind of fuel for the passion and for to have continuous passion. And if you combine that fuel with passion, you actually have a really good chance of success. Not always, because you have to have luck in life and so on and so forth. But so I'm really looking at, obviously, on one hand, where's the world going to, and where are the like big things, and then secondly, where are the teams, and what's the guy, what's the tick on the guy, and combining those two. And again, if you combine those two, you have a big chance of success.
And you mentioned already team culture. I think that's definitely a side of the business itself, and the founding team crucial. What is your opinion? I think also recently I saw another company in US walking away from remote only and walking to a full on-site work. How do you, as an investor, what's your take on that? Do you still invest in companies that are fully remote? Because at the end, from let's say a business point of view, remote companies can scale faster, but on the other hand, the interactions are completely different. The internal culture is completely different. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the phase where the company is in the sense that I really like people to come and to communicate, because you have execution, you have operations, you have all of that, but communication in a company is also very vital. And if you don't have a good system where people sit home and they don't communicate together on the coffee machine and talk about the nitty-gritty important things that are sometimes discussed at a coffee machine, if it's too formal, operational, because you're at home and you do like these meetings, it, in my opinion, doesn't work. But so it could work in a sense that if you have, if and maybe I should explain. Personally, I think the model of technology companies is changing. And what do I mean with that? I mean, if I would look back at 20 years ago when I started my company, the pattern was very simple. You had an idea, you had a developer, 2 developers, 3 developers, 1 sales guy, pre-sales guy, sales, and then you had customers, blah, blah, blah. Then ultimately you had HR, you had legal, finance, and then off you go. And you had like over 10 years, you went to, let's say, 10 million euro of revenue with 100 people. And the first 6 years are miserable because you went down negatively in cash. And then after year 6, 7, you went up. And then, so that was a typical pattern. What you see today, which is very, very interesting, is that this pattern has completely gone. And so what you see now is that you have these great guys, visionary, inner fire, frustrated guys who say, I'm going to do something crazy. And like Musk is saying, I'm going to go to Mars. He knows exactly that we can't go to Mars today, technological, but he says, this is my aim. And these guys put also an aim out, knowing that it's very, very tough. But they look around them and they take the best people that they have, that they know. Not just the average people, not just the so-so, the really best guys. And they take 5, 6, 7, 8 people. And with these 5, 6, 7, 8 people who are typically sometimes remote, because they know we worked with them in Australia, or they know this guy, the developer in Canada, they worked with him, he's a great guy, blah, blah, blah. And these 8, 10 people make a product where they're like extremely focused on the product, building it out, and extremely focused on the customer. So they go very, very quickly to the market, ask feedback, change it, adapt it, change it, adapt it. Okay. They don't have sales because they do the sales. Their product is so good that people say, hey, viral, and they actually go viral with their product. They're only with 8. They don't need HR. They don't need fancy offices. They don't need marketing because their product sells themselves. And what you see is those companies are actually after 3 years, they get to 10 million euro. And they don't need that much money anymore because their cycle is a lot less deep. And they're very, very profitable. And they make like EBITDAs of 60%. And so what you see now, I would call it the mushroom strategy. What you see all over Europe and also in the States is that kind of mushroom companies with 10 people starting to plop up here and there and make a lot of money, very, very profitable. Lovable is obviously
One
the
of
main
them. Yeah.
example, but it's something lovable. Everybody talks about lovable now, but it's something we've seen, like, I would say 2-3 years ago. I actually wrote, I think 2 years ago, I wrote an opinion piece on that, on this mushroom thinking, saying, okay, the world is changing. And that's also something we've looked at. If you look into our portfolio, Crazy Games, for instance, is an example of that. And there are 15 people. You have Hexray in our portfolio, very small team. They have a very, very small office somewhere in Leuk. Cool, really cool company, 80% EBITDA, very profitable. And that also will change, in my opinion, the way that companies are getting funded. And so to come back to your point, I think there's a difference. If you're early stage, 10 people, then you can do it remote. But what you see is those remote 8 people companies at a certain point in time, when they do 50 to 100 million, they say we want to become a billion or 2 billion or 3 billion. Then they have to start investing in operations again, but more in sales internationally. And then they start like hiring more like a traditional, but they only do that when they're big enough. And then at that point in time, you have to build your company again with much more capital and much more. So there's almost 2 phases. There's this first phase, new model until a certain timing, and then they start doing M&A, they start buying other companies, start integrating, they start in much more international still. They started to open offices, and then by that time, different than before you didn't have anything yet, and you were spending and burning money. They don't burn money because they use the cash that they generate to reinvest and to become bigger.
And I think also in combination with the new wave of AI agents, I think that's also one of the optimizations in
For sure.
the new startups right now. You don't even need an HR person. You only need an agent that does a part of the job, that assists maybe a CEO or some other CEO to do
these
stuff.
companies that are these mushroom companies, which is also very typical. Their back office is completely automated, so they use all tools to automate that. So they don't have finance guys anymore. It's all automated, and so maybe one person for the whole backend for CRM, payments. Everything is automated, which is kind of cool. And I do believe that we will have companies with 2 people that will do 10 million euro, 15 million euro, and that will be fully automated.
Okay. The next step here is the hot take timer. So you have more or less 60 seconds. Less is also possible, not more, to give your take on it. So the first question is, founders underestimate how much culture impacts scaling. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I fully agree. I think the culture, if you have like a lot of people who really want to conquer the world as a culture, your company is going to be far better off than if you have a culture where you allow people to stop at 4 o'clock and all of that stuff. I think culture is definitely important.
And European startups also don't think big enough, especially if you compare like US. We are often, let's say here in Belgium, we are very local thinkers. Is that something you agree or disagree?
I agree with, but it's changing slowly but surely. So it's changing, but I also think it's much more cultural. To come back to culture, Belgians are Catholic, and Catholicism is very conservative. We are probably the most conservative people in the world. So we're never gonna buy something exotic or new. We're like, and we don't want to risk anything. We don't want to risk our career by buying from a startup, and that hinders some of our technology companies.
Okay. The next one is, most investors rely too much on data and they do not follow their own instincts.
Yes, but it depends on the kind of people and the kind of fund. If you have a fund with entrepreneurial people, it's different. They work more from the gut and their experience. If you have a fund that is populated with more the McKinsey type, analyst type guys, then it's much more on the data. But data is important, but for me, data is important to assess, but data is not important to like look at the future. At the future, who knows what's happening? I mean, it's much more important to see and to feel the market and to go and talk with customers and so on.
Okay. The next question is too many startups raise before they are really ready?
Fully agree. I mean, it's crazy how much money startups fund these days at which valuations. I always wonder how are they gonna actually make money, because it's easy to raise money, let's say at 50 million euro. There's companies that have nothing and they raise at 50 million or 40 million or 30 million. And they say, yeah, but it's simple. We're going to sell at 500 million. And then I wonder, do they actually realize how few companies are actually achieving a 500 million euro exit? I mean, I'm not taking valuation, I'm talking exit, money on the table. Not that much. If you look into the last 10 years in Belgium, you're not going to find that many. And so, plus also, if you look at the amount of companies that are started in technology that actually reach 10 million euro of revenue, it's only 0.3%. That's it. So all of the other 99.7% are either foolish or they're crazy, but some of them think that, okay, we're just going to start and we're going to reach 10 million in like this, and it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So.
And do you agree that startups, they don't fail because the lack of money, but the lack of focus?
Fully agree, yes. Sometimes companies are, they have a certain idea and they don't stick to their idea because the first customer or the second customer who comes and shows money and says, can you do this for me? They branch off and then they branch off for another, and after a while they have a whole tree and they don't know anymore what's the trunk and what are the trees or the branches.
Okay. Yeah. And as an investor, I don't know how many pitch decks you receive, but I guess a few. But are pitch decks not overrated and often too long and too much blah blah and not too much to the point?
Yeah, I think maximum 10 slides, no business plan, no big written texts. But I also like a story. I think a lot of pitches forget that in the first pitch, not saying the second, the third, the fourth, if you really are talking afterwards with the investor, but the first time you meet an investor, you have to tell a story. You don't have to tell a functionality about a product. I don't care. I want to hear your story. Why are you doing what you're doing? And how do you think you're going to be successful? Tell me a story. And most of them, they don't do that. They immediately show, oh, this is my background, and then they jump into the problem, and then they jump into the solution and the functionality and so on and so on. But they don't tell me why do they experience, or why do they think, or why do they feel that is a problem. Sometimes they just say, well, I heard it somewhere or whatever. But what's the catch? Why are they doing this? Why do they want to sacrifice their time and their brain power to this problem? Why?
The next question, but you already more or less answered it, was the best founders you've backed had something to prove?
Yeah, exactly.
Most of them, I think.
Yeah.
Then another one, Belgium could lead in deep tech, but if we get out of our own way, how do you see this?
I think from the fact that you need less money, given what I've just explained, you will need less money to start. That fact, because before we had a problem, we didn't have a lot of capital to really start and become big, because you needed a lot of capital. Now you don't need that much capital. You need creativity and you need good engineers. And guess what? We have a lot of creativity in this country and we have a lot of good engineers. And so if you combine creativity, engineers with less money, the three ingredients to become this mushroom nation, they are available. And so, yes, I'm not that negative about where we are as Belgium.
Okay. And of course, let's say Europe in extension is more or less a region where companies are sold. And often it's, let's say, sometimes seen as the end. But is it really the end, or is it just chapter one?
It's definitely chapter one, because if you look into the reason why certain countries are more successful than others, it has to do with time. And what do I mean with that? They have much more second generation entrepreneurs and third generation entrepreneurs. And so guys like me who sold their company, who got money, and then what you do as a true entrepreneur, you spend that money again in others. But you do it in a much smarter way because you have experience and you can shorten the time. And the third time you do it is even better. And the fourth time you do it is even better. So if you look into Sweden has much more unicorns than Belgium, but it's because they started way earlier with their technology companies, Nokia and the telecommunication companies. So a lot of people got a lot of money, then they reinvested and so on. So they have much more second, third generation entrepreneurs. So that's why I think the true solution to build an ecosystem and successful companies lies in the fact that you have much more second, third generation entrepreneurs who put their money back into the system and who create even more. And so today we have maybe 10, 15 Belgians who do that. but we should have 150. If we have 150, we're going to have 10 times more companies and much more successful ones, because those second generation entrepreneurs, third generation entrepreneurs help the new companies to not make the mistakes that they've made.
So, for example, the network mafia, henchmen, all of those people. So if we could have, let's say, a few of them in a few years, we could also go in the direction what we have in Sweden.
Yeah, the
And I
only
think
that is a risk, I think, is obviously if the government starts taxing meerwaardes, and they say at 30%, then they're gonna kill that model. Because if I receive 100, look at me, I receive 100 for the selling of my company. I say, great, I have 100. Cool, I'm gonna do crazy stuff with 30 of it. And I do crazy stuff. I give money to like starters that I think they're not gonna make it, but I do research. I fund other guys. I keep my 70 and I do stuff with it. Fine. If the taxation man comes in and says, for 100 you have to give 30 to me, it's now 10, but it's gonna go to 30. I'm pretty sure of that. Okay, then you still have 70, but of the 70, I'm not gonna waste another 30 like I did, and so I'm gonna waste maybe 5. And so what happens is that there's 25 going less to those early stage, and so the government, after 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, they will say, holy shit, we don't have enough starters, which is a problem. And so they're gonna give subsidies to subsidize to get more starters. And I can tell you, if the government starts subsidizing technology companies as starting, it's never a good sign.
no. Then then they went too far in their regulations, and I think, to be honest, I've read also one article yesterday that they had for 90 billion euros commitments from people, okay, also institutionals, but also other, let's say, normal citizens, willing to buy bonds. I was thinking, come on, 90 billion. If we could, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you probably have the better figures, but last year, 25, how many billion was invested in Belgium in startups, scale-ups?
Oh,
1 billion?
startups scale. I don't know exactly the number, but I would say
Rough ballpark.
300-400 million, something like that.
Yeah. But let's
In
say,
startups, I'm not saying like bigger rounds.
yeah, but even maybe the scale-ups as well.
Yeah.
Maybe that's 1
There
billion,
are a
2
few.
billion.
There are a few bigger ones
Wow.
from biotech, which that you count that or not, but it's not hugely. It's not a huge
No.
amount.
So if you could imagine, because when I read that, my frustration is, okay, you can say 90 billion, but what could you do for a local economy with a fraction of
Yeah,
that
I agree.
amount?
I agree.
The jobs, the innovation, you can put a kind of region on the map.
Yeah,
And today it's only stored, what you mentioned. We are very conservative people when it's about jobs, but also about
yeah.
investments. I think is that not one of the crucial elements that's I think we can't expect that the government will do it, because every government needs money, more or less. But I think there should be a kind of trigger
Yeah, but I agree. But the government could also be much more farther thinking. They could say, for instance, okay, if you pay the tax, your 10% plus-value, your meerwaarde, you could also say, you know what, we're going to take that 10% and we're going to put that into a fund, and you become a shareholder of that fund as a taxpayer. And with that fund, we're going to invest in technology companies in Belgium, in Europe, in Belgium, potentially startups creating, and then you can follow as a shareholder, technical taxpayer, you can follow what's happening with these companies. And okay, it might be a fund that creates money over 10, 20, 30 years, but at least you can remain shareholder of that fund. You can remain participant of that fund. You get information. You know what's going to happen with your money. And you know that, okay, that money is going to flow back. And ultimately, maybe if it goes very well, you can actually recuperate some of that money. I think if they would do something like that, that would not cost anything, in the sense that you would have to run it, but it would generate much more in taxes than what they're going to do now. They're going to take the 10%, they're going to bump it into a hole.
in a deep hole. Yeah. And that's the problem, is that let's say our government, I think in general, Europe is always too short-sighted and not enough thinking on the midterm, what is completely different.
Yeah, but the problem will resolve itself. I mean, I go regularly to Asia and to Singapore, and so we're going to get squashed by those countries, squashed. And I think a lot of people here don't actually realize it, but we are like 5 years behind. If you want to learn how Belgium will look like in 5 years from now, just take a plane and go to Singapore, go to China, and walk around Beijing for 3 days. You'll be really surprised. Go visit a couple of companies. Go from robotics companies where they automate the whole thing. I mean, we are far behind, far behind. And I think a lot of people here don't realize. We think we're still like the European great. We're gonna get crushed because they're not only with a lot more, but they also have great technology and they're actually ahead of us. And so I think a lot of people here don't realize that.
I'm afraid as well.
Yeah, and that's
I've
gonna create a lot of problems.
And of course, yeah, the legislation or government, yeah, again, they are only too short-sighted, and I think there should be more an investment climate that is very positive, and again, the returns, as you mentioned, will be multiplied by then just the one-off payments done by all those that received an exit and a few hundred millions, like Henchman, or let's say Mark Cooker, for example, was one of the first with his billion that said, yeah, okay, why should I pay tax? I invest all of my money or a big part of my money in the economy. And if you see what he has done, what you have done, and what you have succeeded with 5 funds, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
what impact is had for Belgium
yeah,
is insane. And I think that's what, let's say, politicians, they oversee this. And I think
yeah, and they
that's,
oversee it, and you're not getting any. I mean, I don't think they should give credits to say, hey, but at least a small amount of recognition to what a lot of people have done. But even that is impossible. They in my case, I'm being harassed by the taxes. I mean, just because they think I have money, and they say, well, you have money, you've sold your company, so we come, and so every single company of me is getting controlled, completely ridiculous. They try to come up with fines, they come up with ridiculous things just to annoy me. And I think if I compare that in Belgium, where I, as an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur, are being annoyed by the taxes, really hassled, and I compare that with other countries where they actually look at entrepreneurs and say, hey, you guys are actually contributing. Great, thanks for what you're doing. Here you're getting taxed, and they say, you're an entrepreneur, you must be doing something wrong. You're probably like working with black money, or you're doing something wrong, and they come and they just say, we don't even want to look at your books. We know we want to get 50,000 euro of you this year because we think that's the way it goes with taxes. That's how they operate in
nah,
Belgium, which is like really, really bad. But anyway.
let's keep it positive. I think,
But I think it's also something that should be said, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that are saying, well, if you're in the newspaper that you've sold your company, you get the taxes over the floor, and they start like doing ridiculous stuff.
okay, everyone is warned.
Yeah, it's true.
Now, one of the initial questions what I mentioned is the gut feeling. When How much do you trust your gut feeling when a first timer comes to you? Um, I think you mentioned the first part, the
Yeah,
storytelling.
I think within
Uh,
I think within 5 minutes, yeah, within 5 minutes I can determine this guy is gonna or this woman is gonna make it or not. It's very strange. I can't explain. It's not scientific, but it's actually is a gut feeling in a sense that you know what you need to do as an entrepreneur, where you're gonna go through, what kind of shit you're gonna have, what kind of problems, what kind of challenges, what kind of optimism you need, what kind of passion you need, and so on. And it's all bolded into one person that comes to you and speaks, and you have like an ability to assess, is this person a true entrepreneur? And there's unfortunately a lot of people who want to create a company because their mother told them so, or their friends told them so, but they're not true entrepreneurs. And a true entrepreneur, I can tell you, the life of a true entrepreneur is shit. It's shit in a sense that in the first years are hell. You sleep hardly, you have a lot of stress, you're always looking for money, your stuff doesn't work, it doesn't scale, you always encounter problems. And the first 5 years, you're like the feeling that you're the guy, the CEO or the founder, and you're surrounded by people, but you're the last man standing on the Titanic if it goes under, in the sense that everybody's coming to you. The bucket stops at you. They come with their problems. And so the first 5 years, you have to deal with problems. And so you have to have a certain character. You have to almost be an optimistic guy to deal with this. That's also why a lot of people say, yeah, but entrepreneurs, founders are optimistic. But if you're not an optimistic guy, you're gonna get crushed in the process and you're not gonna survive. And so that's why it's a certain breed, and it's maybe only 1-2% of people who have that gen or who has that breed inside them. And if you don't have it, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that you're not made for being an entrepreneur. The same like a politician. A politician is also a certain breed. You have to have a certain breed inside you to become a politician. And so it's the same with an entrepreneur.
That's, to be honest, if I watch back to my own, the last 5 years will be horrible. And I knew a lot of people said, Kevin, I think it would be better sometimes to take a break or even sell it. But I thought, no, I don't know. I want to buy through this because this will form me, hopefully, into other things I want to do later on. Because I think one of the aspects that I've learned, walking away is easy, but fighting for it and survive it will make you probably way better. Okay, it will be probably 2 years hard work and a lot of mess, but I think I'm to be honest proud of it that I made that decision not to push away my problems in a way because everyone has problems, and I
Yeah,
think
and the
taking
satisfaction if you do something in this position and you get out of it, the satisfaction factory and the happiness factory is so much more than just having a big car or a big house, or it's just the fact that you have something in your head and you can realize it and see it in life and people are willing to pay for it and you have customers, and that's life, in my opinion. But
yeah, well, I follow your take. Now, the gut feeling is one of thing, but then if you check the numbers and if the numbers says not, this is maybe an investable company, what do you do? Is
if I
what takes over? What takes over?
if
Is it
I'm
still,
if I'm
or
convinced of
even
the
start to
guy,
scale up?
yeah, if I'm convinced of the guy, I'm gonna back him. Even if the numbers you can tweak and you can say, well, you're too optimistic, too positive, whatever, but you can't tweak. If the guy, I mean, again, it's strange to explain, but if the guy is like really willing to go through a wall, and I'm always gonna buy, I always gonna choose the guy, and I rather have a good team with a really shitty product than a good product with a shitty team, because the good team is gonna deal with the shitty product and is gonna alter it and make it into a good product, and the shitty team is gonna really destroy the good product.
And how do you define a good team? Because that's very universal. How do you quantify this? How do you smell it? Because I think that's
Yeah,
smell, it's intuition.
yeah, it's
How do
intuition.
you,
There's a lot of small details, small things. I just give you a stupid example that people come and pitch. Sometimes you have like the CEO comes and pitch with his team, and there were three, and the CEO only talks. For me, that's a red line. I'm never, ever gonna invest in that kind of company. Never. Because the ego of the CEO is too big, and the others are not afraid or are afraid to like talk with him or counter him. And so you need to have like a team where you have different characters, all of them combined, but every single person has to be really good at what they do. So in other words, a CFO, if I ask a CFO something about numbers and about this and that, he has to be able to respond to me. The same with the sales guy. If I ask what's your sale pipe, and now this and that and that. And sometimes I ask questions just to assess what the quality is of the person, the intrinsic quality. And there's a lot of people, unfortunately, that don't necessarily know their stuff. They know it, but not to nitty-gritty detail. And for me, everybody's really good and passionate. He knows his stuff in great detail. So that's all small things that I look at. Also, for instance, how well are they structured? Sometimes I ask questions to them of which the answer doesn't really interest me. I just want to know how quickly can they get it. For instance, I say to them, "Well, you exist now for 3 years or 5 years. 3 years ago, how much capital, how much raises did you do in 3 years ago, or how much bonuses did you pay 4 years ago?" And then you see them like scrambling, looking at each other. Shit, we don't have that information anymore. And then that I don't care about the answer. I just care about how quickly can they get it, because that says something about how they're structured. Are they really well structured? Is it chaos inside? And so on. I always also try to go to the company and visit, walk around, because if you just walk around in the business in a company, you can see a lot just by walking around. Is it tidy? Is it all over the place? Are the documents lying all over the place? That kind of small little details give you some insight, and can actually help you with your gut feeling.
Okay. And of course, let's say now if we go more to the to SmartFin Insight, I guess you're like say monitoring all startups, scale ups, let's say in Europe, even globally. Uh, how do you do this? Because it's an intense work. You have people within SmartFin, but I guess there is a plenty of AI tooling or data tooling that you're using. Um, yeah, how does this happen, and how do you then pick them? Because you can't even talk with every startup scale up that has the right figures. How does this happen?
Yeah, what we do, we get a lot of inbound, but even from early stage where we say, okay, it doesn't really fit, but we always try to like help them in a way, or at least give them some advice. And we work together with Pitch Drive. I don't know if you know Pitch Drive, but it's an early stage fund, and we worked with them to actually assess how do we assess files, and can we put the way that we think into a kind of AI model that then looks into pitch decks and then says, okay, this pitch deck ticks all the boxes in our thinking. And so what they do is, if they get files or pitch decks, they actually go through that and they give it a kind of quality stamp, and then depending on where they are in the quality row for that month, they actually look at it or they don't. And so the best 5% is looked at, and the others are just thrown away in a way. So they assess it based on like AI tools, the way that they should assess the business. For us, typically after you get a lot of business plans and you get a lot of PowerPoints, but sometimes when you look at a PowerPoint after 5 slides, no, this is not going to work, because the things that you want is not in the PowerPoint. Sometimes they forget stuff. What are they looking for? Why do they need money? What are they going to do with it? All of that stuff. So sometimes it's not complete. Sometimes it's a me too, because I always ask the question, is that something that I really would be great if it would be like built? Is it going to change the world, or would it be something that I would be willing to buy or to use or whatever? And there's a lot of nice to have solutions, but not must have solutions. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are focusing on nice to have, which is great. I'm not against it. It's okay. It can survive, but it's not a must have. And there's also a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, that spend a lot of time building out nice to have products rather than must have products. And I think I always look for must have teams that are really good, that are looking into a must have solution or a must have problem where you say, okay, that's a solution I would really like. Yes. There are not that many, because a lot of them do also things that already exist. And they say, well, but that already exists because there are 4 other companies doing that, and 3 of them are like already 3 times as big as you, and so on. And then you see them like scared, and they say, no. And then they look at the companies, and then they see, oh, it exists. And so there's a lot of even ChatGPT. It's really cool, if you just have this company and you just take the pitch and you dump it into ChatGPT and you say, find me 5 companies that actually are doing the same thing. It's not the same way like we assess things, but it's gonna give you already a head start. But even some entrepreneurs don't even do that. So then when they come and we say, well, who are your competitors? We don't have any competitors. Well, it's not possible. Every company has.
Today, yeah,
Yeah.
it's nearly not
Yeah.
possible. Or you have to maybe create something, a kind of new ecosystem, maybe. But okay, that doesn't happen
No, that's the
probably
one.
every
That's the
month.
zero point zero
Uh,
zero 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 zero
well,
1% of the companies. And sometimes it
yeah.
happens. And sometimes you have people who says, I'm going to turn a sector around with this idea, and then you say, brilliant, and then they do it. So it happens as well.
And do you think that VCs will eventually, not only for screening, but even in a further stage of the investment cycle, making decisions on who to invest and who not, or at least as a kind of assistant
Yeah, I
from
think
your
it's gonna be
entire
a system.
team?
It's not gonna necessarily replace completely, but we should also disrupt ourselves. Eh? We should have a system where you kind of multi AI system that says, hey, this is the pitch, and that it says, okay, we've analyzed it completely. These are the financials. Liquidity is not good. The financial plan isn't fit here, and here are the holes. Also, from a marketing perspective, there are three competitors. The pricing that they have is too low compared with, and so on. It's gonna exist there, where you basically will get a full report on the company, 20 pages of very high quality. Eh? The way an
Uh-huh.
analyst today writes it. Eh?
And what are, for example, today toolings that could be useful, but that does not exist? It could be maybe a giveaway for people that listen to this and to give them an idea what they could build for you.
Yeah, I mean,
That
maybe
you say, okay, this is something, let's say, a must-have to make better decisions, to make faster decisions, because at the end, you're also playing in time is also in your disadvantage in a way
yeah.
sometimes.
What I would like to see, but it doesn't exist unfortunately. But I know some companies are working on it. Is that if you have the financials, I'm talking financially now, that you two ways that you can make a kind of cubus where you say you have like the revenue, you have the cost, and you have EBITDA and investments and so on. That you can play around with the cubus and say, let's say that the revenue is 3% higher with the same cost and a bit more
Always an
investments. What
effect.
happens with my EBITDA? But that it's easy, very, very intuitive that you can have like all the different scenarios, 100,000 different scenarios in one cubus. So that would be cool because now we have to run and iterate and that's a lot of time spending. So that's something. And then what I also would like on the financial side, which would be great, is that you could do like a benchmark where you say, I have this P&L, and then I can look at the costs of the salaries of this product against this, but I can benchmark it towards other companies, like 1,000 other companies.
Or
And it says, oh,
sector.
in the benchmark, he basically sits with his salaries 6% higher than average this and then but everything, all the benchmarks and all the metrics against the benchmarks, so that you can actually see where this company sits, and you can then look at what are the top performers, what are the really bad performers, and you can assess where it's going to end somewhere together with that cubus, and where you can also do that for the future, for forecasting. I think that kind of cool, but it's going to come, but it doesn't exist yet. But that would be kind of cool.
But at least, yeah, you have track record, you have the financials of your historical investments and your current investments. So at least for them, you can.
Yeah, but you don't
Let's
have
say
the benchmark of the whole. I mean, it would be great.
no, that's hard. But at least you can compare as a starting point within
Yeah,
your
and that's
own
what we do.
ecosystem.
Yeah.
But the objective is more or less to have, let's say, I'm investing in Belgium, compare this type of Belgian company with the Belgian sector, and let's give me an output where there is where which parts are green or red,
Yeah,
and at least
and
as part of your due diligence in a
yeah.
way.
And what it also would be cool is we would have a kind of like prompt where you can ask questions. You have like a number. They say, hey, what should I do if I want to have an EBITDA that's 3% higher? And it says, okay, these are 7 different things you could do, A, B, C, D, E, and then you can say, well, what would you recommend? Which one? So I like a kind of ChatGPT inbuilt into my financial stuff so that I can ask prompt questions.
Okay, and how much macroeconomic information do you also incorporate when you're investing in a sector or in a certain region? Because at the end, a certain climate in Belgium or others can be more advantage for an investor or disadvantage. How do you see this? Or do you say doesn't care?
We model it, but we don't. It's not like we say, well, the interest is going to change to 3% next year, and we know that, and then we model it like that. We model it much more. Say, okay, let's say that the interest rate would be 1%, 2%, 5%, 7%. What happens? That's something we model, but it's not like we say, okay, we think this is going to happen, because if you want to macroeconomic, if you want to make crazy assessments, then just be a macroeconomist. So
yeah, okay, great. Now we can go to the next chapter. The first question is, you have said yes to an investment but based purely on your gut feeling.
yes,
Does that happen? Okay. You've passed on a deal and later regretted it.
yes,
multiple times then.
Yes.
You'd rather back a technical founder than a business savvy one.
uh, Not really.
Okay. Startups should bootstrap as long as they can.
No.
Do you believe in a founder-investor friendship?
Yes.
Belgium is underrated as a startup
Yes.
ecosystem.
Definitely.
Do you still get nervous before big talks or
Yes.
interviews?
Definitely.
Okay. You would do another tech startup from scratch one day?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. And there will be maybe a second book?
Yes.
Okay. Is this pending or?
No, it's not pending, but I'm thinking. I already wrote some chapters, but I have an idea, a few ideas, but I'm working on some stuff. So
Okay, great. Now, the next chapter is more or less the tech trends and what's next. We already already highlighted the 90 billion from the bonds before. But let's say in a direct line to the Belgian investing in bonds, people with capital, there are enough private people with enough capital, but low risk appetite. What would you tell them? What should they? Why should they change their mind not to go for the safe haven and really immediately invest that in Belgian innovation?
yeah, but I think I would do it more nuanced in a sense that um, spreading your investments is the best strategy. I mean, like doing different things. And so I think if you would just go to all these people who are very conservative and say, hey, the world is changing, technology, blah blah blah, and that's the way it goes, you should invest maybe 10 to 15% of your total worth into technology. And I think if you start that way, maybe by incentivizing people or whatever, then you already had a lot of money, even if you just start with the 15%. Because now there's a lot of people still that don't even invest in technology because they don't understand it. They think it's too high valuated, blah blah blah. So every single person, I think, should at least put some of his money, of his net worth, into technology. And definitely now, because in the next 10, 15, 20 years, technology is not going to go away. In fact, it's only going to get worse.
Indeed. And of course, what is your lookout? Say, where do you think that the tech landscape will go through, and what actually excites you?
Yeah, there's obviously AI, and everybody talks about AI today. But what I'm interested in and spend a lot of time in is quantum computing. I really like that, and I think within the next maybe 2 years, 3 years, the newspapers are going to be full of quantum computing and quantum computers. If I think a year ago I said to people quantum computers, everybody looked a bit funny. Now it's starting to like people realizing. There's a couple of articles now in the press about quantum computers. So that I think is interesting. I think space is also interesting. I think space, and not just space, but you will use and everything that comes out of the research that they will need to do in order to go to Mars. So there's a huge thing that's gonna come out of that in the industry, and new technologies and new stuff that they have to invent to deal with the problems of going to Mars. And so I think that space that's like that happened also in the 60s, when they went to the moon. They had a lot of problems, technological problems. They had to create a lot of stuff, and some of them were useful to go to the moon. But a lot of things that they've worked on were actually very useful in the other world, in our today's world. And so I think investing in those kind of companies in the next 10, 15 years, given the fact that they want to go to Mars, let's say in the next 20, 30 years, that's going to be, I think, an interesting area to invest in.
And one of the things that I was also checking was, for example, legal, because legal is here in Belgium pretty. There are a few startups here. W- is legal tech and maybe also by extension consumer tech, so really solutions for consumers in their day-to-day life. Do you see their kind of sweet spot in a way, or and where exactly?
Um, well, I think personally, the technology is going to enable to change the world things are done. And what do I mean with that? Let me give an example of getting a loan for your house. Let's say you bought a house, or you want to buy a house, you want to get a loan. What do? You go to your bank, and then your bank gives you a rent 3%, 3.5%, because your father was with the bank. Okay, then you say 3.5 is a bit high. I'm gonna go to the other bank next door. You tell them, I want to buy a house. I got 3.5%. What do you want, guys? Want to? I want you as a current customer 3.3. And then you go back to the first bank and you say, okay, that's the way it's dealt today. So the power lies within the bank. The power lies within the guy who sells. I think that you're gonna get into a model, and it's starting already, where you will have like ability to auction what you want to do. And so, what do I mean with that? I'm gonna have a loan. Rather than going to the bank and then go to the next bank, you're gonna go and say, hey, I have this house here. Here is all the paperwork electronically. Here's on Google where it lists. Here are all the pictures. You can whatever. I want to have a loan, and you will send the application to a kind of a kind of entity, a broker or something, and the broker will immediately send it to 100 banks all over the world. And they will say, okay, this guy wants a loan. Who is willing to do that? And so the power will go into a kind of auction system, and not just for, this is now the example of a loan, but that could be for everything, for books that you buy, for things that you don't need instantly, you want to buy. The power, I think, is going to shift much more to the consumer. And I think the models are going to change very rapidly into that model.
And we'll put also a little bit more pressure on prices. And
Of
I
course.
think also
Of course,
the
if you
companies
buy,
will,
yeah, if they buy and say, I want 1,000 books, you're going to get a better price.
yeah, and of course it will, I think today, as you mentioned, the power is always to the big players and not enough to those that really create the data and have the data. And I think that's that approach of changing those that has the power of the data should be in the driver's seat. And I think in eventually it's not only financially, I think, the incentive, but also you receive way more and faster proposals, what you never can achieve if you do it, yeah, yourself in a day-to-day basis. Um, and I think I know one person who is already thinking about that because I spoke with him in December. So maybe I can put you in touch with him if you're interested.
Nah, cool. But I think it's
Because
gonna
he,
it's gonna work in that way. I'm pretty convinced of that.
but at the end, of course, it's a different model. So it's a new way of building products as well, business models. So I'm also very curious how it will work. But that there is potential. Yeah, everyone. I don't know how many houses that there are sold or bought every year, but enough. I think that you can build a decent business there. Um, so you've worked with so many founders, so many startups. You had them yourself. But if you could leave today's listeners one piece of advice, one insight that you say, okay, if I would start my new startup eventually, I don't know when, this would be the tip, the trick that I would use also in that next venture.
Yeah, I would spend enough money to make a very decent contract for the beginning. So to make your contract that you have with your investors, if you invest money, or with your partners or founders or co-founders or whatever, make a decent behave as if it's a big company, and make a contract that has all the ins and outs. Because what I've learned, that if one day, if money comes on the table, people start behaving very differently. Money has a very, very strange effect on people. So you could work 10 years with a co-founder and say he's very rational and he's very normal. And then when money comes on the table, he starts behaving completely irrational. And so having a good contract that takes that all of the stuff into account, say, hey, okay, if we ever part, we're founders, but if we ever part, what is the deal and how are we going to do this? And okay, discuss it before you start, rather than discussing it when something goes wrong, because then it's always a mess.
Okay, so it's mainly the shareholder agreement. Pay attention there because at the end, it's the start of something. And in a way, people always think too positive and not
And
enough.
most people don't do that. They say, "Yeah, but we know each other. Let's we're friends." Blah blah blah, and they make a kind of agreement that's like, well, the bylaws of the company are not really properly. It's not properly done. The shareholders share purchase agreement is not properly done. What happens in case somebody falls off? Blah blah blah, and then ultimately something goes wrong, and then the shit starts. Or if they sell the business, then it's not really well done or well written, and then you start having like all these kind of discussions. And as I said, I mean, people act completely irrational when money is on the table. Very strange, very interesting to behave or to observe. I mean, very interesting.
And what should be then in the document that you say, okay, at least pay attention on these elements, because you can incorporate so many items in the
Yeah, as
shareholder
I said, for
agreement.
instance, if you have a co-founder and you say, okay, you say, oh, we're going to do this together and shares and blah blah blah, just also indicate 1 or 2 pages on what happens if we fall out, if we get into trouble, if we make, yeah, bad lever, good lever, but also who can buy shares from who, and how is that going to be arranged, and all of that stuff. So this kind of stuff.
Okay. Um, Now, I think we had very in-depth discussion about plenty of things, gut feeling, investing, the advice you gave. But I think as we started with Supernova, I want to end with it. So, what is your expectation for Supernova 26? What would be the holy grail?
No, yeah, yeah, okay. Well, I hope first of all that there won't be any tickets anymore available. That is sold out. Which I don't know. No, no, but I think um, last year when Opera came, a lot of people said, "Oh, Opera," and then they came, and it was really, really, really very interesting. And I'm not saying that because we did it and we organized it. The feedback we got from people, 2,000 people in the room, was like really, really good, very inspiring, very people loved it. And I think if we could also have the same effect with Arnold this year, I would be very, very happy. So that's almost on like the an evening with. And then secondly, it would be great, as I said, if we could have some companies being able to attract money to grow further on one hand, and secondly, have a lot of um, inspiration for people who come there, who sit there, who listen. You don't have to be a tech guy. You don't have to be like a true tech entrepreneur. Or you don't have to be a technologist to really have something there. I mean, it's you have astronauts coming to talk about how the world is going to evolve. You have historians who talk about the relationship with the states and how geographical areas are going to have an influence. I mean, it's really interesting. It's just interesting. And my wife, for instance, has nothing to do with entrepreneurship, has nothing to do with technology. It's the third year that she says, I want to come. And she sits there for 2 days and she just listens to all as she talks with people and she listens and she says it's very, very inspiring for me. She gets energy from it. And I think that's also interesting. If you come, you've been there, you're like energized for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, month, 2 months. You say, I'm gonna conquer the world. Let's go for it. It can be done. So and that I think is what I would hope for.
Okay, great. So, we will put the links. Hopefully, by then, there are no tickets anymore, but still, we will put a link on it so that everyone can buy it. And I would like to thank you again for making time for this podcast.
No worries.
And we see each other then in Supernova in a few months.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you very much,
All
Jürgen.
right. Thanks, you guys.
That conversation with Jürgen is actually a good example of why we built Sumlink the way we did it. What really stood out for me is how often companies don't fail because the lack of ideas or talent or even funding, but because things get too complex too early. Too many tools, too many processes, assumptions, too much noise. And the focus slowly disappears. Within Samlink, we work with teams that really want to build real solutions and not just ship features. We help them and the teams turn unclear problems into clear systems across data, AI, and agentic setups. And not as an external advisor, but as a builder alongside of them. And speaking as a CEO, and that's part I care almost the most. We don't come in with a fixed playbook because that's not possible. We help them think, design, and build in a way that still works for them when they scale and not just when things look good on the slide. So if you're building something ambitious, doesn't matter what, and if you want a real partner who helps you focus, make better decisions, and build it right from day one, I think we should have that discussion. We're always open to collaborating with teams who want to build something that lasts not forever, but for long.